The police are often presented as neutral protectors of public safety. But to understand policing in the United States, we first have to ask, safety for who? Welcome back to the Revolution Resolution. I'm Malaika Tubbs. I'm a sociologist, a historian, and a 2-time New York Times bestselling author. In the last episode, we talked about the Supreme Court, about how institutions are not neutral, how worldviews shape the law as well as interpretations of the law, and how many of the most powerful legal institutions in this country have repeatedly protected hierarchy rather than challenge it. And today, I want to continue that conversation by looking at another institution many Americans are taught not to question: policing. Because before we can imagine safety differently, we have to understand what the current system was actually built to do. Many people grow up believing police exist primarily to protect communities, to stop harm, to keep people safe. And of course, many individual officers believe that is their purpose too. But institutions are not defined only by intentions. They are also shaped by origins, structures, incentives, and the systems they were created to protect. And when we look honestly at the history of policing in the United States, a pattern becomes difficult to ignore. American policing has long been deeply connected to the enforcement of hierarchy. In Erased, I write about how systems rooted in patriarchy survive by reminding people where power lies and by punishing those who disrupt the social order. Policing became one of the primary ways this enforcement happened. Some of the earliest forms of organized policing in the United States emerged through slave patrols in the South. Groups of white men tasked with controlling enslaved Black people, capturing those who escaped, monitoring movement, and violently enforcing racial hierarchy. At the same time, other forms of policing developed around protecting property and controlling groups considered threatening to the existing order. As immigration increased during the Industrial Revolution, policing expanded to monitor immigrants and poor communities. Women viewed as sexually deviant or disruptive to traditional family structures were targeted. Workers organizing for labor rights were surveilled and punished. Indigenous communities, Chinese immigrants, Mexican communities, Black Americans, poor people, queer people, and anyone viewed as outside the proper social order repeatedly became targets of policing and state violence. The pattern was not simply protect people from harm. It was protect the hierarchy from disruption. And over time, policing in the United States became increasingly militarized. In the early 1900s, police leader August Vollmer, often called the father of modern policing, described policing as a war against the enemies of society. Now that language matters. Because once communities are framed as enemies instead of human beings, control becomes easier to justify. And who counted as an enemy was never neutral. Black communities were criminalized. Immigrants were criminalized. Poor people were criminalized. Workers demanding rights were criminalized. Gender nonconforming people were criminalized. The hierarchy decided who appeared threatening. And these patterns did not stay in the past. We still see them today. We see them in racial profiling, in police violence, in over-policing of poor communities, in the criminalization of addiction instead of treatment, in the punishment of homelessness instead of addressing housing insecurity, in the disproportionate incarceration of Black, Latino, and Indigenous people. in the surveillance of protest movements, in the ways victims of domestic violence are sometimes arrested alongside or even before their abusers, in the fear many marginalized communities feel not only of violence itself, but of seeking help afterward. A society organized around hierarchy will use policing to protect the hierarchy. That is why policing cannot be separated from racism, patriarchy, class inequality, immigration policy, or the broader question of who is considered fully deserving of safety and protection. And this can be difficult to confront because many people want to believe systems with authority are automatically just. But authority and justice are not the same thing. The law determines who is protected, who is excluded, whose fear matters, whose pain matters, and whose lives are treated as disposable. And police are often asked to enforce those boundaries. That does not mean every officer is identical. It does not mean every interaction is the same. But it does mean we must become honest about what policing was historically designed to preserve. Because if we misunderstand the purpose of a system, we will misunderstand why it behaves the way it does. And before we begin talking about how we build safer and more humane communities, we must first understand this very clearly. Many institutions in this country were not built around collective care. They were built around maintaining order. And order is not the same thing as justice. So today, I leave you with these questions. Who has historically been treated as deserving of protection in this country? Who has been treated as threatening to the social order? And what becomes possible once we stop confusing the enforcement of hierarchy with genuine safety? If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone willing to have honest conversations about the systems shaping our lives. And remember this, understanding the origins of a system is not about hopelessness. It's about clarity. I promise we're getting closer to the healing with each episode.